was crazy across the country, but it seemed like it got really crazy more so on the west side of our state than it did in the Detroit area. Mike, I know you being in Grand Rapids, can you kind of give us a picture of what downtown Grand Rapids looks like right now?
Right now, everything is boarded up and blocked off. The streets right in downtown Grand Rapids, so like Ionia, Fulton, Monroe, Center, all those are blocked up. They started a curfew last night where you had to be in by 7 p.m., which a lot of people held to. I think there was only maybe a half dozen arrests for people who just peacefully sat there and didn't abide by the rules. But the night before was pretty intense. It
was intense. And you know what? It's interesting to see how much people did follow the curfew last night. I mean, there was a total change. And I don't know if maybe, the Grand Rapids PD got caught off guard. But in Detroit, the last couple of nights have been definitely testy, but have been, for the most part, much better than what you're seeing in New York or Chicago or in California. On the phone with us right now is the Chief of Police, Chief James Craig. And Chief Craig, I don't know how many arrests you had last night, but I know, a Saturday night, were we faced with a couple of hundred arrests that you guys had?
Yeah, Mojo, thanks for having me on your show, starting with. And
Thank you.
Friday, we had roughly 80, 85 arrests. And then last night, we ended with about 122. The majority in both days were outside of Detroit.
Wow.
And that's interesting and
also
important to point out.
Very interesting. Outside the city of Detroit, many from the metro Detroit area. In both days, there were individuals from outside the state of Michigan.
Really?
And so it certainly begs the question, why are you here? And when your home states and cities are also having protests. Look, I applaud the protesters. I do. I support the anger. Many of our police officers feel the exact same way. And so we respect that. But, of course, as you've heard me probably say, Mojo, I'm not going to support criminality. I'm not going to support you attacking Detroit police officers and making our community unsafe.
And there's been so many.
Support you to damage property.
There's been so many great peaceful protests day in and day out in our city and others nationwide. And emerging evidence seems to be that there's very organized outside groups that are operating with the intent of just going in and destruction and violence at night and kind of marring the spirit of the protests, and they're very well organized, walkie-talkies, and all. It seems. I mean, are you seeing that here in Detroit as well with the people that you arrested?
Yeah, there is organization, there's structure, but here's the bright light and the great news. I'm talking about Detroiters. I'm talking about our local activists, our community leaders who have stepped up and been out on the front lines and said, not here, not in Detroit. We've worked too hard to get where we're going, and we're not going to let anyone from in our city, but more importantly, from outside the city, come here and ravage and undermine what we're trying to do. So I applaud, our community in such a major way. I think you mentioned it. When you look across when you look at Grand Rapids, when you look at my old home of Los Angeles, where there's been significant destruction of property, encounters with the police. I'm talking about Philadelphia, Chicago, Cleveland, Ohio. What I believe is emerging is just this resilience and commitment of Detroiters. And not to mention, I shouldn't leave out, and equally important, is the men and women of the Detroit Police Department who do a phenomenal job.
Well,
phenomenal.
And also the members, the men and women of the Cloth. We just talked to Pastor Mo a couple of minutes ago. You have that relationship with them where they're not, and they're out there with you out on the streets. Hey, let me ask you this. What do you think, because this is a staggering statistic, that out of those hundreds of arrests that you made, what was it, 20 of them or 22 of them are from Detroit? From the city of Detroit.
Yeah, so you're talking about, well, we can go as high as say 75% are outsiders of the arrest. So now, of course, we can speculate that the ones that we didn't arrest, the troublemakers, those who have had the railroad spikes, the M80s that they were hurling at police officers, those were not Detroiters.
What's up with this fireworks thing? I'm seeing that too. Who goes to a protest with fireworks, pickaxes, bowling balls? I saw that in Chicago. Somebody threw a bowling ball through one of the store windows
to cause trouble.
Who does that?
That's a wonderful question, Mojo. Who does it? But more importantly, you asked about the fireworks. They're very strategic, like we are, and I think that the fireworks are used as a distraction.
Yeah.
Just like when we go into a barricade suspect or execute search warrants, we use distraction devices. It draws our officers' attention to something else, and then they launch another type of an attack.
Yeah.
That's one. The other thing, would you want to be hit with an M80?
No.
Imagine an M80 falling on you on the front lines. It could cause significant injury.
Well,
so it's that piece, but it's also a distraction.
I talked to a number of people who were protesting and said once all this stuff started happening, where craziness happened, they left and went home because the peaceful protests were happening earlier in the day, and it seems like as it got later, that's when all these people came out. What do you think about releasing the names and addresses of everybody that you arrest, putting them in the online on a website or in the free pass or something like that, to show where these people are coming from, but also to show their names so people know who they are?
Mojo, not a bad idea, but certainly we don't want to do anything that would put somebody in harm's way. I think when you start putting names out, and you're talking about individuals who were arrested for primarily misdemeanor offenses, you do that, and then somebody attacks that person at their home or family. I certainly wouldn't want to see that happen.
Isn't that public record anyway?
Once it goes through the court system and they're charged, it becomes.
What about
that become public? But again, I think it's irresponsible.
Yeah.
As a leader of a police agency to potentially expose someone else to harm. Mm-hmm. And frankly, I think there would be some folks that would be very angry because of folks coming in, trying to undermine the great work and destroy our city. I just think it's not responsible.
What about
and that's not something I would entertain.
What about the shooting that took place and the 19-year-old that lost their life? Do we have a suspect? Do we have anybody in custody for that?
We do not. Certainly, we have a grainy image that we put out in the last 48 hours,
which is on Mojo in the Morning, so you can see it on our Instagram. Any tips coming in?
We're still concerned. We're getting some scant tips, but as I've said publicly, it appears that maybe this is not directly connected to the protests.
Okay.
And I know that's a question I get all of the time, but so we're still actively pursuing that, and hopefully we'll get a good break in that case.
Chief, we see these individual videos go viral over the weekend of officers responding to protesters, and in some cities there's some officers who couldn't even stop doing police brutality at a police brutality protest. And I think one of the reasons Detroit is in the spotlight and Flint with Sheriff Chris Swanson, who we had on an hour ago, is because, Chief, you and your officers are doing something right, and you have the respect of the community, but also of the community leaders and the mayor. And it seems on many levels all pistons are firing here, and you're responding a little bit differently to the point where you get national attention from the Today Show and Good Morning America. Do you see a difference and a reason for the spotlight and the fact that you have the respect and things to be doing things right?
Absolutely. As I oftentimes say, I law this department as a department of excellence. Doesn't mean we're not going to make mistakes. I'm very transparent in reporting when we engage in activities that are troubling or even criminal. I don't run from that. That's how you build trust in a community, but also just how we work with our community. I will continue to build those bridges. We don't wait for something like this to happen and say, "Ooh, well, maybe we need to get out and start going to the table and see if we can work out our differences." No. What we do is this is a standard part of what we do, and it's paid big dividends to us. And we don't talk at the community. We talk with the community, and we recognize that our community is truly our partner. And when you reference Pastor Mo, that's a clear example. Pastor Mo will tell you he's protested us.
Yeah,
he hasn't
he told us.
Always agreed with us.
Yeah, he said that's how you guys met at a protest.
That's how we met.
Yeah,
but the thing is, he wants what we want, and it's not common to sit down at a table with a police department in so many places and say, how can we achieve the same goal?
Yeah.
And that's what we do, not occasionally, but every day, even throughout this ordeal. And this is why individuals like Pastor Mo, who are activists and who are leaders in our community, are willing to stand up, be on the front lines with Detroit police, and mitigate the violence that some of these outsiders want to perpetrate. That's the difference.
Chief James Craig from the Detroit Police Department, thank you so much for being on with us. Appreciate you, and we'll continue to talk to you. And do you expect that protesting will continue through the week, or do you think it was just a weekend thing?
No, I'm hearing that there will be protests today, so we're day by day, and we're always prepared.
Curfew still?
Curfew still is in place.
All right.